Hi, third graders. We're going to pick up with our writing. And I just want to remind you that the last time we were together, your job was to pick a lead. Remember, we talked about some different types of leads, ways that writers start their story. And I wanted to point out that I wrote my lead, which you probably remember from the last time, at the top of my power organizer in that very top triangle. I also highlighted it today because I want you to be able to see where I put it when I start my writing. Before we get into that, I want to show you how we're going to actually add feelings and senses into our personal narrative. You're going to have a copy of this. This is where you can write in again who is in your story and think about the main characters, where your story takes place, and then also when your story takes place. And we're going to talk a little bit today about feelings and senses. So senses that you know, right? Your sight, what you hear, what you smell, what you feel with your hands or your skin, what you might taste with your mouth. So we're going to talk about those types of things that you can remember from your story situation. We're also going to talk a little bit about things on the inside. So the feelings that you had when you were experiencing this particular situation. Like I thought, or I wondered, maybe I decided, or I felt, I believed, I imagined, I hoped. I want you to be thinking back to that. I've had some friends say to me, well, I was so little, I don't really remember. If you can't remember the details of your story, then you need to pick something else to write about. This should be something that you have good memories of and you can explain to other people. So if you're having trouble with these types of things, you're going to want to think again about what personal narrative story you're going to tell us. If it's a time when you were, 2 or 3 and you can't remember those details, think about something more recent, maybe first grade or second grade. So I want to show you my organizer. Okay, you remember my story, which is about learning to paddleboard. In my story, the main people in it were my friend Rhonda, obviously myself, the instructor that was teaching us, and then there were other people in the story because we had a larger group of people who were learning. I didn't put all of those people down. I just put a group of people here. Here's where we were. We were on Echo Lake, and Echo Lake is a small lake in Bar Harbor, Maine. That's where we were. It was in the summertime. This was the year. I don't know that that really matters, but it was June into July. It was the morning time when we did this lesson. It was actually in June when we did our lesson. And then thinking about what I'm noticing on the outside. So here are some things that I saw. It was really sunny. So the water was really shiny. If you have ever been on the water on a sunny day, it's kind of like a mirror, right, where it's reflecting the water. Things that I heard. There were children taking a sailing class. I also heard gravel because part of our story takes place in a parking lot, and it's a gravel parking lot. So you can probably remember what the sound of kind of crunching under your feet sound like. I smelled fresh air because I was outside. I also smelled fish because we were on a lake. I felt, obviously, water when I was getting in the water. I also felt something sandpapery. I wonder if you can think about that. If you've ever paddleboarded, you know that the top of a paddleboard is kind of grippy, maybe kind of like a skateboard. So when you're bent on your knees, that's a little bit painful. I tasted. I didn't write anything down here because I didn't really taste anything that I can remember at least. Okay, so think about maybe if you were at like a baseball game, maybe you tasted popcorn, or you tasted ice cream, something like that. Then on the inside, these are my feelings. These were some things I was thinking, right? I hoped I wouldn't fall because that was my biggest fear. I'm not a very good swimmer, and I was really afraid I was going to fall. I was nervous. I was excited, right? I kind of hoped I could do this, but I wasn't quite sure. So I want you to write down, most importantly, these things down here, your senses and your feelings. You might have a good idea of this information from your power organizer, but you might not. So maybe this will help you narrow it down, right? I wrote some similar things on my power organizer right here So think of this kind of as the same thing. And if you're having a hard time, this might be able to narrow it down. All right. So thinking about those particular things, right? Things on the outside, my senses, my feelings on the inside, I'm going to show you how I started my writing. Now, keep in mind, you're going to need some things to help you get started, right? Most importantly, is this thing right here along with your power organizer, because you took information off of your plot mountain, right? And you transferred it on to this power organizer that shows the rising action, the turning action, the falling action, right? These are the big ideas that you want to include in your story, okay? Let me show you how I started mine. I'm going to show you my introduction, and I'm going to show you my first paragraph. So actually my second paragraph. My introduction is my first paragraph. This is my second paragraph. I told you we would have 5 paragraphs by the time we get done. But I'm just going to talk mostly about my rising action. So thinking about this part as we're climbing up the mountain. Okay. I hope you like it. I'm going to need to go back because all good writers go back and reread and they fix it and they make it a little bit better. So here's what I have so far. You might have to help me with that. Remember, I used this Plot Mountain to help me out as I wrote my story. Okay. Get my fancy pointer here. I want you to be able to see it. It is Halloween time after all. I picked up my paddleboard and took a deep breath as I charged toward the water. Notice, I got that right from the top of my power organizer. When we planned our trip to Maine with friends 6 months earlier, the one thing on my wish list was learning to paddleboard. Even though I'm not a confident swimmer, I was excited at the thought of walking on water. Do you notice that I put quotation marks around walking on water? Am I really going to walk on top of the water? No, but being on a paddleboard, I was hoping would kind of make me feel like I was. A couple things I want to point out. I talked in here. This is my first paragraph. This is that top triangle, right? I started right off with my lead. And then I mentioned, right, kind of where I was, who I was with. Okay, gave you a little bit of background. Now I'm going to start with my rising action. So you can kind of get kind of behind the scenes and you can start to see what's happening in the story. Here's my good transition phrase. First of all, it was a beautiful June morning, and my friend Rhonda and I quickly ate breakfast before driving to the paddleboard shop. We were both excited and a little nervous at the same time. I sure hope I can do this, I thought to myself as we got closer. Ooh, that's where I'm kind of using some of those feelings on the inside, right? We met our instructor, Chris, and after a short truck ride, we arrived at Echo Lake. It was a nice summer day, and sunshine filled the sky. We met the other members of our group in a gravel parking lot, and I was starting to sweat. Was it the weather or my nerves? I wondered. As Chris explained the parts of the board and tips for getting in the water, I could feel my mind drifting. Can I pull this off? What if I fall? Is it too late to back out? Starting to panic a little bit. Remember on my Plot Mountain, I talked about my feelings. I was excited and nervous, and I started to get scared, right? I wasn't quite sure if I could actually do this. Remember, I'm with my friend Rhonda. Rhonda could tell I was doubting myself, and she said, I know you're afraid, but what's the worst that could happen? Even if you fall, you're wearing a life jacket, so you'll be safe. So she told me that. Remember, one of the things that makes a good, strong personal narrative is some dialogue, conversation. So this is what Rhonda said to me. That's why I put it in quotation marks. So she spoke to me. I quickly realized she was right. After all, I couldn't let her down because this was her vacation too. Okay, so I've got a good start on my story. I have my first paragraph, which is my top triangle. Okay, I started with my rising action here. Talked about how we ate and we went to town. We went to the lake for the lesson. I talked about how I was feeling, right? And I was telling you how he was starting to give us some tips, right? How to get in the water, parts of the board, that sort of thing. So I'm working on this part here. I might go back and add to it, but I'm pretty happy with how it's started so far. So your job today, you've already picked your lead. Okay, I'm going to go here and I'm going to highlight just like I did on my power organizer. Right there, I copied the exact same words. I didn't change anything. That's the lead I wanted to do. Maybe you didn't want to do an action lead. Maybe you wanted to do a question. Maybe you wanted to do the 3 ing words, right? It's up to you. You get to choose. But I want to point out to you that what I already wrote on my power organizer is how I'm starting my story. Okay. Do you notice this big space right here? We call that a 2-finger indent. It's kind of like taking my 2 fingers next to my red line when I'm writing. And that's where I start my paragraph. Remember, we said this is going to be 5 different paragraphs. So look, here's another 2-finger indent because that's where I start my rising action. All right, so your job today is to write down your lead that you chose and finish your introduction with the information that's on your power organizer. Now, of course, you have to turn these things into sentences, right? It's not a list. You want to make it interesting for your reader because you're trying to get them to continue reading the rest of your story. And then you can start with some kind of a transition. So we're moving from one thing to the next. And if you look on a couple pages back in your writer's notebook, we had that page on transitions, ways we can start. Okay, let me see if I can flip this without it getting blurry. Right, those are words that help readers kind of process things, moving from one thing to the next. This is the beginning, right, of our story, that rising action. I chose first of all. Okay, maybe yours makes sense in the beginning. It's up to you, but it should make sense with your story. All right. So your job today is to write your lead. Okay, and write your first paragraph. Get started with your second part, your rising action. And don't forget, before you start to write, take some time to talk about your senses so that you can add those into your story. Take some time to add your feelings, right? What you're feeling on the inside, that you can add that to your story as well. I'm excited to read these.